if you do enough digging, you'll find out the stories that have been buried. Now, when I took this on originally, it was in my book, Genetic Armageddon, which you and I introduced to your listening audience, a decade ago.
Yeah.
But going forth, I started writing this and really researching it, for the past couple of years, but writing, it 8 months ago. And what was fascinating to me, and should be fascinating to everyone now, is the direct admission that Hitler never died. I don't know if people have been noticing it, but the mainstream media across the world is all of a sudden pulling Hitler out of the bunker in Berlin that he never died in. Now, what's astonishing to me is that we've all heard of the Hollow Earth theory. We've heard of Admiral Byrd, Operation High Jump. We've heard of all those different, if you will, almost rumors from the close of World War II. But as I started to really investigate First Secretary of Defense Forrestal's, quote, suicide, actually murder, Admiral Byrd's talking to the press after Operation High Jump, which took place in 1947. The whole premise of this book is that the United States did not win World War II. They had a showcase and a show cause with the Nuremberg trials, etc. But when we squared off against the Nazis in the South Atlantic with basically 15 ships, 2 aircraft carriers, and 3 of the most famous admirals in the Navy up until that time, this wasn't a coal expedition as mainstream newspapers tried to portray it. What was fascinating to me is 2 years before the Germans, quote, officially surrendered, the biggest multinationalists, both financiers and technology-related companies and drug-related companies in Germany started moving their assets to different places in the world, primarily South America and into the Antarctic. Now, what's interesting, I don't think most people have ever really paid attention to this, so that's what gave me the prompting, George, to write this. I'm going to quote just a real quick historian.
Sure.
James Robert, WW2 historian and writer, interviewed a British wartime SAF officer. And he said in the summer of 1944, British scientists and commandos had found an ancient tunnel. Under orders, the 30-strong force went through the tunnel, but only 2 returned before the Antarctic winter set in. And what was interesting is the 30-man team was relegated to 2. And what was the most fascinating thing is they talked about Nazis under the ice, polar men, and an under the ice city. Now, that's been a common denominator for so many years, and behind all of the intelligence that's gathered, you cannot separate the interrelationship between the financiers, the financial parties of both the United States and Germany, and the different nations of the world, and the cover-up of ancient German technology. So the German technology was interesting because in the 1947 Operation High Jump, there was a literal battle using flying saucers, and even the Russians have a documentary and an interview with the generals that explain what went on. So this stuff got declassified from the Soviet archives when, the breakdown of the Soviet Union and the KGB opened up a bunch of their information to the public. So what we have now is we have the real reports of Admiral Byrd talking about the spaceships that could fly from pole to pole almost instantaneously. Now, first people will dismiss this and say, oh, this is crazy. What's going on there? But the Antarctic became more fascinating when a lot of the events that have been associated with aliens, UFOs, and all the different phenomena seem to kind of aggregate there. Most people believe that only 50 of the U-boats were unaccounted for. Interesting, when you and I did a show a number of years ago, I believe one of it was a great-grandson of Admiral Donitz, who was the Reichsfuhrer after Hitler supposedly died. He was the German U-boat commander for all of the U-boats, the submarine forces, and his great-grandson called me after you and I were on and saying, you're the only one that has ever spoken about what my grandfather said, or maybe great-grandfather, that the world wasn't ready for what's coming down. Now, it's my contention that with all the Hitler series on TV, I don't know if you've watched
them. Yeah, I think it was the Discovery Channel, was it?
Yes, sir. Why all of a sudden? Well, here's what's going to happen, in my opinion, and we'll give the bottom line and then go back and build it. the idea that the advanced weaponry that Germany possessed, the advanced genetic alteration and experimentation that went on, and I put up for your listeners today on my website the whole story of Dr. Mengele in Brazil, which they made a movie of, the boys from Brazil, and the point is that in one little town in the middle of nowhere in Brazil, what was found were some of the greatest amount of twins. I don't know if you remember that story, but it's fascinating that Mengele escaped. No one ever found him. He is believed to have died in the 70s, but the point being is as you start to track down each and every one of these anomalies, they all lead back to the fact that Hitler did not die in the bunker, that the genetic engineering experiments of the Nazis and the Third Reich were so far advanced that their advanced weapon systems that they absolutely introduced into the world scene, so much of that became classified after World War II that the United States even had an operation signed off by the president that was called Operation Paperclip. And under Paperclip, famous guys like Dr. Werner von Braun were brought into the United States and given new identities, and they were divorced from any of their, quote, Nazi affiliations. And it was Walt Disney, I think in 1954, that promoted Dr. Werner von Braun as literally one of the smartest men in the world. So there has been a cover-up that has been ongoing for all these years, and it all goes back to and this is going to be fascinating for people, the Germans spent an intense amount of money, expedition, and literally to the four corners of the earth looking for ancient artifacts and relics. They even had a group called the Ahnenerbe, and the Ahnenerbe meant ancestral heritage. It was Hitler's belief and the Third Reich's belief that they were the Aryan race, that they were somehow the noble Nordic warriors, and that it was their duty to reinstitute the Uberman, you and I've talked about that, or the Supermen, or the race that controlled the planet and would control the world. Now, people don't understand that megalomaniacs with money can get whatever they want accomplished. So in Empire Beneath the Ice, how the Nazis won World War II, I lay it out, and with enough footnotes. I was telling somebody that the footnotes are extensive, and even the zero-point energy, like Nick Cook and others who have been dismissed. I mean, some of these guys are fabulous, fabulous investigators and researchers, and when you add it all up, the Nazis absolutely tapped in to the multidimensional Stargate realm and were given so many advanced weapons. It's my contention, the bottom line, that, and I'm going to overuse that word, and somebody will send me an email saying, you say that all the time. I'm cutting to the chase, that the Nazis absolutely, through their banking interests and through their conglomerates, still rule the world and are going to bring about the Antichrist, and it's going to be the most astonishing thing because they're going to use the technology they've developed that the world's kept hidden and that they possess and that our government possesses and that the Russians possess. Now, why is this important? Well, we're at World War III.
Jerry Corsi, in his book, Hunting Hitler, by the way, Stephen, is convinced Hitler fled to South America. They built him a mansion. He shaved his mustache, and that's where he lived and died.
And I don't differ. I take a different approach to this, is that Neuschwabenland was the name of pretty much the northern part of Antarctica. You know, the Germans staked out 230,000 kilometers. Most people don't understand this, that the first real claim of territorial expansion was when Germany sent their fleet down there to pretty much flag it, tag it, bag it, and claim it's ours. But in the story I told about the SAS finding the tunnels, interestingly enough, in October of this year, the Arctic anomaly warning a circular opening has formed in the middle of the Antarctic ice pack. That was the 20th of October, 2015. Now, all of the polar explorers, all of them said as they got to a certain point, it got warmer, and they noticed that there were areas that couldn't be, defined by supposedly the ice. And what's fascinating is the fact that obviously people say, do you believe Admiral Byrd's diary? And maybe we can get to that whenever you want. But Admiral Byrd's diary maintains that his plane was taken into one of the polar openings. And what is astonishing is it's not just his story. There's multiple stories and multiple witnesses confirming, both on the Antarctic and in the Arctic, North and South Pole, respectively, an opening. What's interesting to me is that, and I think it will be to everybody else, is that we get the obvious impression from history that it played out one way. I think it was Churchill that said history is always written by the victor. That doesn't mean history is always accurate. You know, I mean, everybody wants to embellish their conquests, and that's why the Egyptian pharaohs built so many monuments. The same thing with Rome, and said, look at all the wonderful stuff we did. But when you dig beneath it, you find out maybe all of it wasn't as wonderful as it was portrayed. You know, in the world we now live in, it's called braggers' rights. To the victors go the spoil. And unfortunately, the other thing that gets spoiled by the victors is the truth. So in the book, Empire Beneath the Ice, How the Nazis Won World War II, I lay it out, but one of the things that I've tried to combine is the fascination with the occult that the Nazis had. Now, after the Nuremberg trials, that was actually brought up at the trials, and everybody kind of snickered and laughed. But it would be interesting to people, I think, to find out that the investigation of some of Hitler's leading men, even the SS, we've been told it means one thing, but it literally means Schwarzensonne, my German's not that great, but it means black sun. So the Order of the Black Sun, Heinrich Himmler, and all of the people that were in the SS were very deeply involved in the occult and believed that they could make contact with other world entities. And in making contact with other world entities, were given dictations. One of the most famous ones was with a guy by the name of Johann Eckert, or Dietrich Eckert. That was Eckhart, his middle name, Dietrich. The point being is that they absolutely, I guess you would say, conjured up spirits, and then they took the time to literally ask them all the questions. So once again, what most people don't realize is the Third Reich, gods, beasts, and Nazis, you cannot get away from the supernatural. You usually ask me on the show, and we can just hit it right now, when you're dealing with biblical prophecy, when you're dealing with the beast, the Antichrist, the false prophet, you come up with still a time period where the push is towards a one-world government, the push is towards a one-world religion, and the push is through a one-world currency. Well, we've got the Pope echoing that. We've got John Kerry saying, you know, all this world's chaos is to bring about a new world order. That's the whole motto of the global elitists, you know, order ab chaos, or order out of chaos. So when you hear him and you hear George Bush Sr. making that statement 230-some times when he was president, you begin to think these guys are ready to implement.
Oh, of course. I was convinced years ago, when we heard accounts that he burned his body and his girlfriend's body, his fiancée, that they were hiding something. I mean, it was obvious, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And what's known in a matter of historic record, which I document extensively, is that both of them had duplicates. You know, even modern, I mean, I'm not saying they were clones, but they had lookalikes. And that was in order because, if you remember, the assassination attempts against Hitler, he was very, 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 at that point on, and even prior to that, worried that would be the case.
Oh, my God. He was paranoid.
I think he bordered on more of a paranoid, but he was also psychotic. And with that, he basically became so enamored with the idea of making, if you will, a bunch of little Hitlers, that he made sure that there were duplicates and even triplicates of them. Now, I'm not talking about true identical clones, but which brings me to the next point. If Mengele was able to do all the things that he had done, and by the way, a lot of the reason why so much is unknown about both Hitler and Mengele is to cover up that the United States pretty much, how should we say, vacuum cleaned up all of their known resources, meaning in research, and integrated it into our own defense community. It was not by accident. Even people that were full-blown Nazis were given new identities. The famous Dr. Ishii of Unit 731, which was the Japanese equivalent of Mengele, was brought into the United States and given a new identity, and they lived peacefully in the United States under a guise of basically, what would you say? They were given a whole new persona, and they never had to atone or account for their misdeeds. Now, again, it becomes hard for people to understand every day, George, the acceleration of biology, all of the attenuating things that they're going to do with gene editing. Obviously, what we're seeing now is the time when, talking about this stuff 10 years ago, I mean, my email, ha, ha, ha. Now, I think more people are going, you know, because when you're dealing with singularity, when you're dealing with human enhancement, when you're dealing with cloning humans, when you're dealing with all these things where it was future tense, now it's present, and it's present headlines. Well, I submit to you that obviously somebody has Hitler's real DNA. I submit to you that it would be a fascinating twist on even the standard dispensational Bible prophecy that if Hitler claimed he was going to rule and reign 1,000 years, maybe instead of just the ravings of a madman, he knew more about the cloning that would be done. And most people used to look at cloning as just scientific clowning around. But now, I'm telling you, it is astonishing to me. There is no shortage of stories of human genetic enhancement, which brings us back to Admiral Byrd going into the hollow earth. Mm-hmm. You know, there are people that claim Byrd's diaries are fake, but here you have a Navy admiral that absolutely, after his briefing from 1947, he disappears for 8 years. They literally put him out to pasture or kept him away from being able to talk to people. And that's that whole time when the Men in Black came out, the UFOs, remember, from Roswell on. I've long maintained that all my writings and research that the whole flying saucer phenomenon is more of an extra-dimensional, not an extraterrestrial, though they can, obviously, once they enter into our dimension. So getting back to the Nazi Stargates, it was fascinating that through the Ahnenerbe, which was a group of the SS that went throughout the world looking for religious relics, i.e. the Spear of Longinus, they were looking for the chalice, they were looking for the Ark of the Covenant, but they were also looking, interestingly enough, for giants. And I just had to throw that in. Even Mengele would sit on the ramp at the different camps that they would bring the people to be destroyed into, and he would specifically want anyone who had any genetic difference, but he spelled out, interestingly, he spelled out giants and dwarfs. Now, what that's critical for is because when Byrd's diary is gone over by, on hour by hour, almost minute by minute, the race that the king of the world, and that's what he's called, is called the Ariana. And they were looking for the Aryan. The Nazis thought that there were two opposing factions. There was Shambhala, obviously Three Dog Night fame, and then there was Agatha. And so they saw these two, if you will, old, multi tens of thousands of year old civilizations at war. And they decided they wanted to side with the Ariana. So the point being is when the Admiral Byrd is taken, his aircraft is like kind of taken in with a tractor beam, and it lands, and he's taken to meet, quote, the king of the world. What's fascinating is everything has German names. You probably have seen that. They refer to the Fugelstedt, the flying saucers. So when you've got Russians corroborating it, you've got the U.S. I mean, listen, Nick Cook, Zero Point Energy, did a fabulous job. Jerry Corsi on Hitler did a fabulous job. Why is it now all coalescing? Why is it you and I are on Coast to Coast in your show on December 4th, and on October 20th, 2015, another Arctic anomaly shows up, and it matches the one of the ESSA, the Earth satellite, of almost 20 years ago. And that's when people would not have even believed this stuff. Now, I believe, too, here's something that the Stargate phenomena is becoming more prevalent every day. You saw that the new gamma scanning of the King's Chamber and what may be Queen Nefertiti's tomb in the Great Pyramid of Giza. What was interesting to me about that is the timing of all this. So what I look at, and I think you and I have done this over the years that you've interviewed me and we've talked on radio, is I look for the coalescing, like a hub, all the different spokes coming into the center. And now Hitler, let's just say this, if someone were to say that the Fuhrer is alive, and remember this, the Wall Street financiers absolutely were tied in with the German financiers and the bankers. You know, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution by Anthony Sutton laid that out easily. If
there was a Bush, Preston, was it Prescott Bush?
Yep.
Who supported Hitler.
Absolutely. What people don't understand, and this is where it gets relevant too, is the Muslims sided with Hitler during World War II, especially in North Africa, where the Desert Fox, Rommel, was stationed. The whole timing of all of these Hitlerian revelations now are astonishing to me. What would happen, I'm throwing this out, what would happen if we saw Hitler and we were told that he's been cloned, okay, or he was basically an alien / supernatural reproduction of the man he used to be? Maybe he doesn't look like Hitler, but maybe the people in the know, bring him out at the right time. And let's say the advanced technology of the UFOs that the Nazis have had now, obviously 1947, that's given them 68, almost 70 years. And what happens if from their under the ice base and other underground bases around the world, they pretty much are pulling the strings? There's an unseen hand that pretty much controls everything on the planet. And so the World War III that we see unfolding right now, and I can tell you this, if people think this is just a game, they don't understand the history of the Cold War. This is the hottest, most tense period there has ever been after the official close of World War III. And now we're getting into a situation where the unseen hand may play up. These guys want to destroy 90% of the world's population. You and I talk about that, but 90% of those people don't believe it.
Stephen, the technology that the Germans possessed then, and if the Nazis have gone undercover, what is that technology like now?
Well, it's obviously developed beyond, according to people that I've talked to, George, that live in the world of black physics. Black physics has got to be defined. It's the area of physics that you're inducted into when you pass a test. In other words, it's a whole different level of physics. The Germans had a neat name for it. I'm not even going to try and pronounce a German because I don't do a very good job of it. But they had a word for their advanced flying machines and their advanced weapons, and they called it the Otherworld Flight Machine. And what was fascinating about this, and I got a whole chapter that goes for 30, 40 pages on this stuff, that basically is talking about the Vril, which is their society, that basically the ancient Sumerian language was being used to the mediums, and I referenced earlier on the show that the whole structure of the Nazi global war machine was based on the occult, supernatural revelation. So a German researcher named Jan van Helsing, after examining a number of the German documents, he got close to these guys, and he basically said this, that not only had the Germans perfected saucers based on seances, but at the end of the war, some of these machines had been piloted out of Germany and most likely went to Antarctica or some other secret base. Did you ever see the movie Hellboy?
Yes, I did.
Okay, do you remember that scene where some GIs come upon some kind of an occult ceremony, kind of an abandoned ruin,
right,
and it's the Stargate? I have been told by people in the know that that was real, that the Germans were able by, now here's the key, okay? We know that the end-time war that's coming is a supernatural war, when the literal devil, and whether people believe it or not, listen, the people who are the leading proponents, the Pope, he is absolutely proclaiming these are the end times. The head of the Russian Orthodox Church is proclaiming it's the end times. The Jewish mystics are proclaiming it's the end times that they've started.
Our late guest, Glenn Kimball, said we were in that.
I echo it. And the point is that what does it take to get people to understand? Now, somebody says, what's this stuff relevant about, this master race stuff? You don't understand, ladies and gentlemen, and to the critics out there, what they are talking about doing is enhancing human beings on the left hand. But on the right hand, they're talking about doing away with human beings through robots and being able to, if you will, download your collective subconscious, everything that made you a human, and basically put it into, if you will, a storage bank that allows this artificial construct to live your life in perpetuity. The two will not go hand in hand. So when we get into the whole idea, the otherworld flight machine, you're dealing with things like tachyon drives. Tachyon drives enables a spacecraft, or whatever you want to call it, to basically exceed the speed of light. Do you remember, George, that about 2 years ago there was a bunch of articles in the London Daily Mail and the BBC and others were carrying it that scientists can exceed the speed of light? Do you remember?
I remember that. I'm not sure they really are able to, but I do remember that.
Well, let me say this. In that which is known as conventional physics, no. In the world of real physics, yes. And one of the interesting things that Mengele did with twins, okay, is twins were a quantum experiment to him, to the point that they could instantaneously communicate. It didn't matter if time or distance, it didn't matter that the time and distance was great or not great. In essence, it was an instantaneous or spontaneous. In other words, it was a quantum entanglement, okay? This gets fun. What the Germans were doing in their advanced, what I call occult scientific technological base, Mengele, and by the way, he was never taken alive, died 21 years ago, 36 years ago, and the thing is that he was experimenting in what would be called the latent powers of the soul, okay? So what was going on, and where this becomes fascinating, is that the Anunnaki, in other words, the ones who were out, that word is just ancestral heritage, were looking for everything. You're going to love this, from giants to cyclops, okay? The Anunnaki sent teams, military teams, and by the way, the Raiders of the Lost Ark series, Steven Spielberg.
I was just going to bring that up. I mean, that was so accurate.
It was so accurate. And what's astonishing to me is that when somebody says, well, what's this stuff all have to do with where we are now? If what we're telling you they had 60 years ago, and with the laser weapons, by the way, and one of the things that's fascinating is the laser weapons and the plasma weapons were loaded on these saucers, okay, and they were absolutely chronicled as being in use and taking down the fighters that were launched off of the aircraft carriers in Antarctica. So you can say, well, this isn't very important. This isn't very, relevant. Oh, it's really relevant. And if these people have had that ability for this long, where are they now? And that's what Russia is trying to warn the West about, okay? That's why they leaked their story of their seismic torpedo. That's why they are telling us, look, you don't want to go there, is that somebody who is unseen is controlling all players. entire technological advancements that are hidden from the American public, that are being promised, if you will, as the golden fleece to those that go into the New World Order, forsaking all national boundaries, all country claims to you, and you become a citizen of the world. And, oh, by the way, you take the mark of the beast, and, you just basically go on with life as we dictate. The Bible says you take the mark of the beast and you're damned. For the purpose of those who, let's call them the illuminated ones, the ones who are absolutely the globalists, the Satanists, and by the way, I throw them all together. People say, well, that's not true. Well, let me share this. Based on what I'm studied and writing about in 520 pages, the bottom line is that Hitler believed that he and his, if you will, cronies, those who bought in to the whole dialectic which Nazism was producing, would bring about a supernatural rule and reign of someone on earth for 1,000 years. Now, he's confusing that with, the Antichrist. We know, biblical says he's got 42 months. But the point being, George, is that they're not going to be able to handle this stuff. I quote Henry Stevens, Hitler's Flying Saucers, a guide to German flying discs of the Second World War. I don't go out and try and research all this. I find the smartest guys in the world. Nick Cook, Nick Cook, Zero Point Energy, a lot of these guys you've had on as guests.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what I've learned is this. They can tell you what, but what cannot tell you the they. In other words, the who will tell you what's going on, but what's going on won't tell you the who.
These Nazi flying saucers, where's the technology?
You and I spoke about the Vimanas, okay? The Vimanas, the ancient Hindu flying machines that even at a presentation of NASA, the Indian scientists brought designs, even brought the formulas for what the propulsion systems were, okay? So reverse engineering is where they come from. The ancients had it. I think you and I did a whole show on that, didn't we? Or at least an hour of a show.
Sure.
But the Nazis got their designs, okay, from the esoteric realm, from seances, from people that absolutely testified. These were spiritists and spiritualists that testified of ghost-like figures dictating to them advanced mathematic formulas, okay? So when you say where did it come from, I'd say ancient technology, okay, ancient, meaning tens of thousands of years ago, and contemporary spiritual revelation.
Stephen, let's talk about our space program. And, of course, the success of the program was, as you mentioned, Operation Paperclip. And that is Russia, the Soviets at the time, and we grabbed as much German brain power as we could. And we got Wernher von Braun, who headed up our space program. He was a Nazi, there's no doubt about that, but he toed the line when he came here, did he not?
Well, he toed the line, but also it is my contention and the contention of others. Look, we have electrogravitic propulsion. We've had it for 50 years, okay? Even Popular Mechanics back in 1956 carried the G transport, which basically states that you can overcome gravity with electricity. The official rocket program was a distraction, okay? The real black ops stuff are what we would call the TR-3Bs, the triangular shape, faster than light. Now, again, understand, in Einsteinian physics, normal physics, you can't go fast in the speed of light. In tachyon and in the world of black physics, I've talked to those guys. I've talked to guys that have flown them. I'm not kidding you.
What do you think about this, that Adolf Hitler's autobiography and manifesto, Mein Kampf,
yes, sir,
is going to be republished in Germany for the first time since 1945. They're going to do it with 4,000 copies just to start. What are they doing?
I think what they're doing is basically they're going to look for the final solution to their own situation. The fact that if you look at Angela Merkel and what she's done, and by the way, I don't call it immigration, I call it invasion. And I think if you've seen, did you see the 19-minute video of just the tens of thousands of Middle Easterners flooding the German and Austrian countryside?
Oh, my God, yeah.
And the only way you could liken it is to a swarm of ants. I tried to come up with some form of a word picture to explain to people, and that's on YouTube. But now YouTube took it down, so I think it's hosted on their sites now. But look at what Merkel's done. Now, here's what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and George, this makes perfect sense in knowing the order out of chaos. John Kerry told it. They signal what they're doing. They're creating global chaos by bringing in the undocumented or non-checked out refugees, and they're overwhelming the systems. They're taking down countries. Michael Savage says it's border language cultures, and that's exactly what they're destroying. So by bringing out Mein Kampf, you're going to see the right rise in Germany. You're going to see the great-great-grandchildren of these people that I detail in my book. By the way, it's 520 pages, it's 200 illustrations, and it's the most mind-boggling investigation I've ever done, and I get into some weird stuff, okay? But the point is that this is the crown jewel of weird stuff because it is so apropos. The roadmap for how the, if you will, the secret control of the government, it was running things after World War II, even right up into our day. Now you're seeing the intentional disruption of national borders. Everything that you could even term as culture is being absolutely destroyed. By the way, that's what Hitler did too. Here's the parallel. Hitler and his SS made sure that only official art, that art which basically promoted their viewpoint, was allowed. Everything else was burned or sold off. We saw the ransacking of culture that had existed before in Germany and in that whole part of the world, Western Europe going into Eastern Europe. And what do we see now? We see the downfall of Western culture. We see the overwhelming attendant issues coming with the invasion. And again, you can study the Trojan Wars all you want and the Trojan horse, and we've got Trojan policy. So the idea is this: total destabilization of the world, basically getting war going on all fronts, the depopulation of the world, and then bringing on the man of peace, who these guys, all the globalists, the industrials, and the secret rulers of the world basically are going to bring into the public eye. They have to create the problem. They've got to make it so bad, so desperate, and so horrible that anybody that brings peace brings it. And that's why the Bible calls him the man of peace.
I have been talking for 4 years, Stephen, that I've been feeling something strange about to happen. It's manifested itself. It's become more current. A lot of other people have been feeling things. I think the episodes that have been going on now in Paris and the tragedy in San Bernardino, California, I think that's what we've been feeling.
Oh, absolutely. And isn't it fascinating that every time there's a tragedy, there's a correspondent exercise going along with it within hours of the event?
It is weird. It is
well,
weird.
Here's why it's not weird, it's staged, okay? Now, don't get me wrong. When I say staged, I don't mean people really died. But what I'm saying is that some people want to say it's all theatrics. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the more and more the horror, the greater the cry will be to do us something. I mean, you've got to ask yourself this, and it doesn't matter who the President of the United States is number one priority in a constitutional republic, which obviously he doesn't believe in, is to protect the people. What's astonishing to me is that it's obvious when you've got the Border Patrol, when you've got the military, when you've got everybody screaming, look, we're provoking Russia to go into World War III. Why? Well, the reason is simple this: it facilitates the global mindset. Vladimir Putin, I believe, one of the smartest men in the world, because he's not going to drag himself into that or allow himself to be dragged into it, but he's already said, look, I'll deal with this the way it needs to be dealt with.
He's a chess player.
He's a chess player. Just because a pigeon walks all over the chessboard, defecates on the chessboard, and then claims he won the chess game doesn't mean he won the chess game. In other words, if you take the world as a chessboard and the people that know how to play chess, yet somebody comes in and just says, I know what I'm doing. The man that represents the United States now is held in total contempt. And one of the thing is, and I'm saying this on a world stage, we have watched the decimation of the country take hold. The middle class is destroyed. And people say, I don't believe that. Oh, yeah? Remember all the times we used to hear that retail sales drove the economy?
They're not driving it anymore.
Yeah, well, let's just say this. They may have driven it, but now it's over the cliff. The debt structure in America is basically a mantra of nonsense. We owe so much money that, the 18 trillion, the 20 trillion, the 200 trillion, it's beyond that. The smartest minds in the world can post 100 different reasons why we're facing collapse. And you know what? Everybody says, well, the game's still on, I still got my, whatever they've got that they think is
that they think they have.
That they think they have. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like you're living in a mansion. It's in a termite-infested woods. Everything is eaten out from under the way, and you're just waiting for the right wind to blow, and the whole place comes down. You'd have to be insane not to see that we in the United States have been provoking Russia through NATO. The destabilization in the Middle East, whether it started with Iraq, it carried into, obviously, Libya, it's carried into Syria, it's destabilized everything we've done. It was not this way when, obviously, we left Gaddafi in power and Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
And
all we had to do was keep those people in check.
The interesting part of this, George, is that this thing is not tailing off. So Vladimir Putin has shown amazing restraint. Now, by moving the weapon systems that he's moved into Syria and basically positioning the military assets in the Navy and the submarines and everything else, he's making a statement.
Yeah.
Back off.
Yeah.
And so you ask yourself, why would we, with a military, and these are my opinions, okay, that's been devastated morally, and I'm saying, and through morale, devastated through a lack of leadership with 350 generals, admirals, and high-ranking military officers fired, with a absolute downgrading of our military response and preparedness, with basically a lackadaisical attitude that, hey, we're not going to build up our national defense. Remember that the president, under his early promise, was he's going to have a civilian police force as strong as the military. The problem is the military is designed for external enemies. A police force or a group of brown shirts is designed for the internal.
That's right.
And by the way, I believe Vladimir Putin was the most honest man on the world stage when he looked basically in the direction of the United States and specifically towards Obama and said, do you realize what you've done? The idea that the United States should engage Russia is silly. We had the opportunity to demonstrate to Russia we weren't the carpet-bagging foreign policy enforcers that we basically raped, pillaged, and plundered and then built up all these puppet governments around the world. We could have really made a difference. And I think that when you've got Vladimir Putin having the head of the Russian Orthodox Church praying over his men and the President of the United States denying prayer to his men, I don't think Russian special forces are impressed with the new footgear of the American fighting soldier. And I'm not mocking, I'm just defining when they have to put on red high heels shoes to know what it's like to be a woman or wear a pregnancy simulator. I don't think that impresses the world's military powers at all. So what's happened?
Jeez.
We're seeing the total, in my opinion, setup for the destruction of the United States, both internally and the provocation of, it doesn't matter if it's China, doesn't matter if it's Russia, doesn't matter if it's not giving Germany's gold back or France. The point being is we're right there, George, and it's a hair trigger, and it only takes somebody crazy doing one crazy thing to light it up.